It is Thursday. It is 6 o'clock. That can only mean one thing. It's 6 o'clock and it's Thursday. Also, it means I've just had the most ridiculous half hour, Ollie Mammon, that I've ever had. Hello, I'm Russ Kane. This is Men's Radio Station. This is the ABC of CBD, live, uncensored and direct, exclusive to Men's Radio. And you can hear us on Twitter. You can see us on Facebook. Go to our YouTube channel, Men's Radio Station YouTube channel. Please smash the subscribe button, hit the like button. Everything you do really helps us. I've had the most stupid half hour and I'm just trying to take a deep breath and be in the moment.
Use your vape pen, Russ.
Do you want to know what I did? No, I won't do it on there. Do you know what I did? So I came in from a very successful meeting, but in Soho, right? Had the meeting, came back, can't find my car keys. What have I done with my car keys? Oh, God. I threw some washing on. Yes, they were in my trousers in the washing machine. Fantastic.
At least
right?
It wasn't your phone.
No, I wouldn't.
I've done
very
that.
Close. Then
I've
I picked up a coffee cup, knowing it was empty. No, it wasn't empty. It was absolutely full of this morning's espresso everywhere. And then I looked for some more keys. I'd left them in a lock. Oh, God. You know what? This is going to be really good, says Veronica Curran. If I can get my head out of my bottom, it'd be marvelous. We've got a fantastic guest, someone who's been so busy in the media recently. Thrilled to have them, but I don't want to take away anything from Ollie Mammon's thunder. Come on. After we've done the ad break, Mr. Sinner, our wonderful producer, Ollie, you'll explain who our fantastic guest is. Meanwhile, a word from our sponsor.
I'm sure you've heard before that good quality CBD needs to be really, really expensive. This is the new view of CBD, a product created by users for users, a product at an affordable price, available everywhere, at any time, at the simple click of a button. Just CBD and MCT oil. No additives, no preservatives, and no flavor enhancers. It's a simple subscription-based service. The cleanest possible CBD delivered to your door for the lowest possible price. Your product, your rights for the lowest possible price.
I'm going to break a habit this week. I'm not mentioning it.
Don't mention the box.
I'm not going to
stop mentioning the box.
It's so exciting. All right, Mr. Ollie Mammon, the count of cannabinoids. There you go. A hunk of hemp. Off you go, fella.
Fine. So I really can't believe this. I actually feel like we're running like a real news radio station at the moment. So we actually have an exclusive. Oh, news.
Chic.
Huh? News. So basically, I don't know if you're paying attention to British media at the moment, but epilepsy and cannabis medicine is a huge topic at the moment. We're really fortunate to be joined today by Hannah Deacon. I don't know if you know anything about Hannah Deacon. I'm going to give a short introduction in a little bit. But basically, she is the Florence Nightingale of our industry. She's an incredible woman. She's been on an incredible journey. And over the last 2-3 days, Hannah has literally been all over the media, as well as several other individuals who are fighting for the rights of epileptic kids to get cannabis oils on prescription. Hannah has been on a very interesting journey over the last several years. She's going to tell you more about it when I bring her on. So I'm just going to quickly run through my introduction. I want to get her out here. She's got more important things to say than any of us. And fact of the matter is right now, it's so important to kind of strike while the iron's hot and get this into people's brains whilst it's still out there, so we don't just move on tomorrow and forget. It's really important that we remember and we try and do something about this. So today we continue our journey into patient stories and the incredible journeys that patients have been taking with their loved ones to find hope. Today we share the very inspirational story of an incredibly strong and driven and motivated person, someone who has fought for the life of her son, someone who has stood up for the needs of the vulnerable, someone who has educated herself, forged her own relationships, built her own bridges, and then continuously trying to influence a system for the benefit of all of you out there. For many people, patients, and sufferers, she is their voice. Hannah Deacon is extremely well regarded in our community for the work she has done and the milestones she's been able to reach. But this has not been a simple journey. Hannah has been round and round, up and down, side to side, and then some. Hannah's son, Alfie, has epilepsy. The journey to keep her son alive has not always been an easy one. Hannah originally moved to Holland with her son for several months to secure his unique cannabis medication. There, she forged relationships that have helped many others and many other young patients. Over the last few years, Hannah has managed to secure one of the first free and legal NHS cannabis prescriptions for her son. You would think at this moment she would stop fighting. She's got what she needed. But no, not Hannah. She's not here for her or even her son. She's here for all of you and all of your children. And it's very important because there's a massive community feel around these epileptic kids and their mothers, and they really are all fighting for each other. Hannah's fight continues, her campaign continues, her advocacy continues, and her incredible bravery is the center point for the needs of epileptic children everywhere. She is the depiction of get up and stand up for your rights. Okay, if you can think of a picture which is a face to that term, get up and stand up for your rights, Hannah Deacon is that picture. She should be in the dictionary. Even though we have a medical cannabis system that exists in the UK, it is far from functional, as we're about to hear today. There are many gaps in this system, especially when it comes to children and epilepsy. As we discussed with Taneem Montgomery several weeks ago, post-Brexit, there has been a lot of difficulty obtaining the medication that is required for these children. This has not worked itself out. The UK medical cannabis system is becoming more and more constrained. Child patients are not being provided what they need. There is a problem with the system. Hannah is speaking up against this injustice for you and your loved ones, and it's important that we all listen and we support her. So let's give a very warm ABC of CBD welcome to Hannah Deacon. We are so lucky to have her here.
Hi.
I love writing my
introduction.
Thank
you,
writing my
Oliver.
introductions.
That's what we've got time for this week. Thanks, everybody.
Yes. Bye-bye.
I wrote that in 30 seconds. That's how real you are. It's so easy to write a description. Actually, to be honest, most of our guests are very real in what they do. But I mean, It's so easy to write a description about you. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming. And I really can't believe we've got you here. So excited. Yay.
It's a pleasure. And say thank you for such a lovely introduction. That has made me feel a bit emotional. So thank you.
I will write you introductions whenever you want. You ever want to feel emotional? I'll write you a poem. It'll be fine.
That is Ollie's happy face. It's great. We love seeing Ollie's happy face.
So rare. So rare with Russ.
It is rare.
So go on, let's get started. How did this all start? Like, when did this all start? How did this all start? When was Alfie diagnosed? How long was he using conventional medicine? Give us a little bit of the backstory of how cannabis came into Alfie's life.
Okay, well, I'll just say one thing is I'm a bit of a talker, so if I talk too much,
this is radio, so you're in the right place.
Yes, I'm all right, in a good place.
Exactly the right place. You carry on.
Use those pipes.
So I will. Let's go for it. So Alfie's my first child. He was born in September 2012, and he was very well when he was born, and everything was fine until he was about 4 months old, and he became quite unwell with quite a compromised immune system. And then at 8 months old, he had his first seizure, and I remember the date. It was 27th of May 2012. I was awoken by him screaming. I ran into his bedroom and he was having a huge tonic-clonic seizure, which I'd never seen before, but I knew that it was very dangerous because his arms and legs were shaking, his eyes were rolling in the back of his head, and he was an 8-month-old baby, and it was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. And I remember touching him and he was boiling hot. I shouted for my partner, Drew. He ran in, and by that time it had stopped, so it was a very brief one. And we just bundled him in the car and took him to our local A&E. And they were very laid back about it there, really. They were like, oh, he's got a really high temperature. He's probably had a febrile convulsion. They're very normal in babies. It's fine. But it became very obvious very quickly that he was very seriously ill. And he continued to have these tonic-clonic seizures of up to 2 minutes every sort of 15 minutes to half an hour. And by the time we'd been in there for a couple of hours, they started on the epilepsy protocol, which every hospital has. You know, if you're going with a heart attack, there's a protocol. If you're going with epilepsy, there's a protocol. And they had to put a cannula into him, and they just started pumping him full of anti-epileptic medication. But to be honest, it was just a whirlwind. I remember ringing my dad and just breaking down and just telling them that he was so ill. I mean, we went from being quite a normal family with no one ill in our family other than the normal, age-related diseases. We'd never had autism or epilepsy in our family. So it was it was just the day my life changed, really. And it still makes me feel very sad because it was horrendous. And Alfie actually stayed in hospital for 4 months. He ended up on a life support machine because they couldn't stop his seizures. He was having seizures every 15 minutes to half an hour for 3.5 weeks. And he's lucky, very, very lucky to be alive. The only thing that stopped his seizures were when we got to Great Ormond Street Hospital via Stoke Hospital, who couldn't help us for 2 weeks, believe it or not. We went all around the country. We ended up at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and they were very, very good. They did a test called oligoclonal bands, where you take the brain fluid in the blood at the same time, put it in dry ice. It's a very expensive test, but they found that he had massive amount of white blood cells. So when they did the test, they take the test of blood to check if you've had a viral infection, that was normal. But when they did this more invasive test, he actually had white blood cells all over his body, and they said he was having a massive immune response. So they gave him intravenous steroids and his seizures stopped, but he was very damaged by that. And he'd lost all his skills. He couldn't sit, he couldn't swallow, he couldn't look at me. I mean, it was absolutely heartbreaking. And then and luckily the seizure stopped. We went home and we were told to rehabilitate him, and they actually said, we think it might be isolated, it might have been triggered by a virus, because he's not having any more seizures, and we haven't seen a condition like this before, and all the other tests they'd done were normal. So we were like, well, great, we can rehabilitate him. And then it happened again 8 months later. So he had another massive cluster of seizures. It's a very cruel disease. You think, oh, great, we're out of the woods. And then it bang.
It's awful, Hannah. You're absolutely right. Well, you
and,
must
and
have been
I am
absolutely petrified.
Yeah, I was petrified.
Horrible.
We are, we still feel frightened about his condition because it's not gone away. And I know in some sense I'm very, very lucky that Alfie doesn't have seizures every day, because he has, he had stretches even then of seizure freedom, but when they do come, they are very, very serious and always need hospitalization at that point. So, some children have epilepsy who can have seizures all day, every day, and never need hospital treatment. They're like, and so that's very, very debilitating, very hard to look after. But it's not the medical emergencies like we were having. So, it's definitely not a competition, but it's a very different form of epilepsy because it's very, very aggressive. But he wasn't having seizures every day, thank God. So,
but it's like having
we were getting some respite.
It's like having a loaded grenade in your pocket that you don't know when it's going to go off. At least, like if you pull the pin, that it's going to blow up. But I mean, if you're not, if it's 6 months on, 6 months off, it kind of puts you in a position where you don't really know what's coming or going. Exactly. I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying it's worse. But I mean, at least when you're standing on stable ground, you know where you're standing. So, like someone who, I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm saying, but at least when you know where you are, you know where you are. When you don't know where you are, epilepsy is one of those illnesses which, I know people with epilepsy, not that much is known about it. And it's like the years go on and less information. It's almost like less information is known the more time that passes, because all of the assumptions that were once made are actually falsified as opposed to truth becoming validified. Sorry, I just it's one of those things I've realized. But yeah, carry on. I'm sorry for interrupting your flow.
No, it's fine. It's, I think it's good to have a conversation about it. And I actually appreciate you saying that, because I think you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head. When a child has seizures every day, it is harrowing, but you also know what what to expect. With us, we were waiting for it to happen. So I was diagnosed with very severe PTSD when I was pregnant with my second child because of that, because I was literally every night going to bed going, is it going to be tonight? And that, to live in that state of fight or flight and anxiety constantly is very, very, very harrowing.
It must be exhausting.
Exhausting, yeah. You're like, your adrenals are going pumping constantly.
You're getting lots of praise from our viewers and listeners. Veronica Curran, these mums are warriors, which I've actually was tweeting just a second ago. And Chrissy Richards, watching in from Spain, says, hello, everyone. Brave person. Feel for you both. My son started epilepsy seizure severe when he was 28. Oh, wow. Don't know why. So, you're obviously resonating with everybody all over the world.
That's nice. Thank you. So, yeah, his condition continued like that till he was 4. And then so we were having clusters every 8 months. He was being pumped full of steroids. He was coming home. And we were a bit rehabilitating him, because every time he had them, he would regress as well. So he'd lose language, he'd lose physical abilities, that sort of thing. So we'd then have to rehabilitate him, and then it would happen again. So it's a very...
Oh, she's frozen.
You there, Hannah?
No, she's frozen. Or Yep. No. Sadly, Hannah Deacon's frozen at the moment.
She'll come back in a second.
Yeah, she'll come back in a second. Do you know what always stuns me, Ollie? Is this every week you tell me I've got such and such coming on? I go, great. We have a little natter about it.
Sorry.
She's back.
So it's okay. I was just going to say.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi
No,
went off.
don't
for
worry.
some
Wait,
reason.
you want to swap with my Wi-Fi? It's like two Ovaltine tins with a piece of string.
My Wi-Fi is fine.
London.
I'm cool.
You. Nobody's.
I'm legit. Young person Wi-Fi, Russ.
Yeah,
you should get young person Wi-Fi.
Anna, do you know where he lives? Because we're just going to go around and bitch slap him. Now, here's the thing. Every week, Ollie says, I've got so-and-so coming on. Every week, guests like yourself, I sit here with slack-jawed like the village idiot, because what you go through and what happens is A, horrific, and B, inspiring the way you deal with it. It's amazing. I'm sorry, I just wanted to put that out there. And I started saying that to Ollie when you froze with your...
With my terrible Wi-Fi, sorry. I live in... It's usually quite good. Sorry about that. It's probably the time of day.
Oh, yeah. It's all because all the Americans... Seriously, because all the Americans and the rest of the West, as we travel, they'll come on. And so the bandwidth gets used up.
We'll blame the Americans. That's
I'm
fine.
blaming the Americans. Right. Where were we? So
anyway,
you were saying you had PTSD.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was exhausting.
Not until, it was very, very difficult. But when he got to 4, his clusters started to happen every 3 weeks, and there was no understanding of why his condition got worse. So every 3 weeks he would wake up. It was always 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. That's the other thing. His seizures never started during the day. So it was always when we were fast asleep, we would get woken by a scream, and he would, and that's, the condition he has, it comes with the seizures that he has. So it's because it's such a violent seizure, it pushes the air out of the lungs very quickly. So it causes this like harrowing scream. And so we'd be woken up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning by this, and then it'd be the tonic clonic seizure, and then we'd have to ring an ambulance. And then we'd have to go into hospital, and then we'd be there for up to a week where we were trying to stop his seizures, and then we'd come home. And as he got older, what we noticed with the steroids is that they just cause severe behaviour problems and emotional problems. So he would sit and scream, he would sit and cry. I've got pictures of me where he'd literally have dug his nails into my face and scratched me, pulled my hair.
God.
And it's because he was so high on the fact that he'd had all these seizures, all the drugs he'd been given, midazolam, which is a horrible drug, but it stops you. It basically shuts your brain down, so it stops you having seizures. Other anti-epileptic drugs, and also, but we know the only thing that actually stopped his seizures eventually were the steroids, but they take time to work to get into the system. And so we were just in this roundabout of either going into hospital, having these severe seizures, horrendous situation, and then having to rehabilitate him and deal with someone who wants to be near you. Like, he wanted me. I'm his mum. He wanted his mum. He felt awful, but he couldn't stop hitting me and punching me and kicking me because he was so ill. And it was absolutely horrendous. And by that time, when Alfie got very severe, I had a 1-year-old daughter that I was also still breastfeeding, that was also still waking up in the night. My partner was trying to run his own business and keep a roof above our head. I was a full-time carer to Alfie and a full-time mother. And we were, the only way we actually survived is from our family. And I don't really talk about this enough, but my partner's sister Abby and my mum and Maggie and my Drew's mum Pauline has basically kept us together when things were really bad, because we wouldn't have survived without them helping us. And Abby used to stay the night in hospital with Alfie sometimes, so Drew and I could just have a break and go for a pizza or whatever when he was in hospital. So we are truly, truly grateful to them for all they did for us, because at that time we actually had no respite, no social worker, no nothing, because Alfie's condition wasn't constant, we were told, because he wasn't having seizures every day. We didn't qualify for any help. So and that's the other thing. I'm absolutely not NHS bashing at all. We had amazing support with our local hospital.
Can I hold you there a second? Because the thing is, brave people like you, they say they lay a grenade and walk on, because to them it's like, well, we've dealt with it. And then lay people like myself go, what did that person just say? So because your little baby's not having epileptic fits and seizures every day, you didn't qualify.
No, we had 2 social worker assessments.
What the hell would you have
5,
to do? Sorry, I get annoyed.
What am I paying my taxes for if not to help people like this? As in,
and
what's
that's
the point?
what's so important for people to understand, that before your child is 5, unless you have very, very severe debilitating condition, i.e. that you would have seizures constantly, or you couldn't walk or anything like that, then you don't really qualify for any help. Once you reach 5, then you do start to qualify for more help. But I think it's this idea that, I don't know why, but like you could sort of grow out of it or something. I don't know what it is, but basically we didn't qualify for any help. And that's why we were so lucky that we had our family.
You know, what are they hoping for? It's like a miracle,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
You know,
like you'll grow out
going
of
to be
it.
a blinding light above your, and a big finger coming through the.
Yeah.
You see, I get so irate. I get so upset, Hannah, on your behalf, because like all good little citizens, for the last year and a half for the rest of us has been weird. I've put it very politely. Trust me, not a patch on what your life has been. Please don't misunderstand. But we've all been told, and we've towed the party line, you know, save the NHS, which we've all, you know, saved them. And then you've got a little baby who's in such dire straits. Isn't it like, it'd be nice if the NHS was, I understand it's not their fault, but it seems so unfair.
Well, I agree, and as I say, the local hospital to us, the nurses became our friends. You know, we spent more time in the hospital than we were at home, and they were wonderful. This is not about the necessarily the personal relationships that we forged, because actually, as well, Alfie's doctors now are the only reason that Alfie has that prescription, because they worked with me to get it, and they are amazing, and they have his best interest. But I think as a whole, the NHS is not funded adequately enough to support families like mine, and that's simply my experience.
Just to be very, I just want to make my position very clear, if I may. It is not the nurses and the doctors who are working their socks off.
No.
You know, it is whatever the rules and regulations are. The rules and regulations are not made by the doctors and the nurses. No. And I've had a load of operations and all that sort of stuff. I got to tell you, they were fantastic.
Yeah.
Just fantastic.
It's just a system.
I think it's the system and the management and lack of money. And, you know, people would just, you would assume, rightly or wrongly, that when you go from having a child that's perfectly well to chronically ill, that automatically you'd be offered mental health support. That doesn't happen. There's no mental health support.
We fight for it. We fight for it all the time on our radio stations.
This is a mental health radio station. This is like Russ's bread and butter, because of the fact that mental health is so under what's it called?
Represented, I would say.
Exactly. And the fact that you have PTSD, the fact that you had PTSD, okay, you're in the trenches alone. You know, you're fighting this battle alone. You've got a hospital there when things get bad. But I mean, in terms of the general in between those terrible moments, you're still alone. And it's just not right. Yeah. It's not right. You know, it's just not right.
It's not right. And actually, my experience of the NHS is that they are basically symptom suppressing. So you go in, you're ill, they suppress your symptoms, you go out again. They're not actually... They don't have the sort of the money or the facilities, they haven't got the time to actually diagnose you and really look at the root cause. And that's what my job became with Alfie. Is I was like, I'm fed up with firefighting. I'm not going to keep going in hospital like this. I was very lucky. My mum actually paid for me to have private counselling because I was in such a bad way. One of the nurses in their local hospital put me in touch with a man called Graham, who is a psychiatrist who basically deals with prisoners. So people who do have PTSD and anxiety problems, mostly people in prison do. And he was very, very experienced. And I just went and saw him every week and cried my eyes out. And that's what I needed, because my partner was going through the same thing. And that's what's really difficult when you're parenting a very poorly child together. And I've met so many mothers on their own in hospitals, because you're both grieving, you're both feeling so sad, and you both need each other to be strong for each other, and you can't be. I mean, and that's what, you know, Drew and I went through very, very difficult time when Alfie was so poorly, because he was very upset. He was trying to run a business and keep a roof over our head. I was looking after Alfie all day, where he was beating me
because
up.
there's no
and
respite.
There was
Hannah,
no respite. There was no break. We couldn't go for a drink with our friends or
There's
anything.
nothing.
Exactly.
It's unending and it's exhausting.
And I remember at the end of
horrible.
2016, I literally looked out the window, and I used to live on a road with a primary school at the end of it, where my little girl goes now, and watching the parents walk up the road with their children. And I just sat and sobbed, and I was like, I just want to be that mum. I just want to take my little boy.
Did you feel angry?
Yeah, I felt really angry.
Shall I tell you something? I'll tell you something, Hannah. I have a specific reason why I asked you that question. It wasn't random. When my wife had cancer, and we were going in for and she was desperately ill, and she was being treated at the Royal Marsden. And the only time I got angry, and it was completely irrational, was when I saw all, people like Ollie's age and younger, and they look and they're walking along, and it's South Ken, and they're on the phone, and they've got all of life ahead. And it was completely irrational. I knew that. I mean, I was kind of intelligent enough to say, you got to divorce yourself from that. Yeah. But that's the only time I got angry.
Yeah.
So I understand you looking out the window, seeing all the mums and dads
feeling jealous,
kind of like a care in the world.
That's it. It's nail on the head. It's the jealousy. But the fact of the matter is I want to say you're allowed.
No, Ollie,
Hannah just used that word.
I felt a bit. I'm not saying you felt jealous, but I felt.
No, I didn't feel jealous,
and I didn't. I felt really sad that it wasn't me, but I also inside sometimes felt a bit angry. One, because people had children that were well and had no clue what I was going through, but also a bit like, woe is me, why can't that be me, sort of thing. I felt sorry for myself, and I felt really sad, and I felt full of grief.
That's completely fair, isn't it? That's completely fair in this situation.
I also wished that it wasn't me doing this. I wish, why was it me that I had to be beaten up by a child every day or watch him have seizures?
Hannah, let me digress for a second before we get on to the main reason why you're here. I just want to say one thing, because this is a station all about mental health and well-being. I think the fastest way to go, and I'm going to use colloquialisms, okay? The fastest way to really lose it and go around the bend is say, why me?
Yeah,
because
you're absolutely right.
It doesn't work. If you want to go down that road, you got to say, why not me? Because life is just a random lottery. You don't know what the hell's around the next bend. You don't. And the moment you try to look for a reason or a rationale, I'm thinking about your baby, I'm thinking about personal stuff, discover there isn't any. And so the moment you stop looking, you can it clears up a lot of stuff.
Russ's mentality is more of Russ's mentality is more of the, life doesn't throw anything at you that you can't handle. That's what you're trying to say, right?
No, not at all. No, not at all. What I'm saying is the people look for reasons. Right. People look for reasons, Ollie, for stuff. Why did someone, say goodbye and get hit by a bus? Why did somebody die of cancer? Why is this happening to your little boy? There's no reasons. Because that's the whole point. It's just utterly random. And so looking for reasons is it's a natural reaction, but it just doesn't help mental health at all.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. But I was very, very blessed at having a very, very happy life. I mean, my parents divorced when I was 7, which was very sad and took me a long time to get over. But I'm very lucky to have a good relationship with both my parents. But other than that, I grew up in Brighton. I had lots of fun. I had loads of friends. I went out all the time partying. I worked hard. Nothing really fazed me. And when that happened to Alfie, I was like, oh my God, it was so shocking. And as you say, I think I went through this process of why me? What have I done? What happened? Why did this? And I did all this stuff. I processed all this stuff. And then when Alfie was actually diagnosed with his condition in 2016 of PCDH19, which is a very severe genetic disorder, which usually only affects girls. So it's on the X chromosome, which is why he was never tested for it. So it presents with clusters of seizures, very severe or very mild to severe learning delay, but also severe behaviour problems. So it can be violent behaviour, things like that, because it's the way it affects the brain and the proteins that it interacts with. And he's one of 9 boys in the world. And as soon as I realised that he's one of 9 boys in the world, and that actually our doctor said to us, we just need to keep using steroids and hope that he gets better with age, I was just like, no, you know, I know him better than you. You actually don't know anything about this condition. And that's, genetics is great in the sense that we can diagnose genetics. But other than that, it doesn't help anyone. I went to see the geneticist and I went, what does this mean? And they went, well, we don't really know. We just know that it's disease causing. We don't know the method of action. We don't know why it happened, because I don't have it. My partner doesn't have it. So they call it a spontaneous reproduction. So basically something environmental happened to Alfie that made him get this mutation in the womb, outside the womb, who knows? And I was just like, this is just nonsense. I felt quite angry about that as well.
Only
like,
9 people as well. Only 9 people. It's 9 like, and not 9 people in the UK. It's 9 people in the world. So 9 people out of 9 billion people.
Well, 9 boys. There's about 25,000 girls. So it's very rare in girls as well. So it's 9 boys.
Now the treatment for girls and the treatment for boys, does it differ? Because they're
very different. They all present differently. So some children have 1 or 2 clusters of seizures and are perfectly cognitively normal and just grow out and sort of grow up and are well. But mostly it's very severe, sort of can be like Alfie has sort of mild to severe global development delay. He does have behaviour issues.
Sorry, what is that? So
global development delay just means everything is delayed. So your speech, your learning, everything. Okay. And it's just called a global development delay. So that can be the fact that he's had so many seizures. It's his condition. It's probably all the drugs he's had. It's lots of reasons. Okay. And when I found that out, I became very, very low, because I just thought, that's it. The rest of my life is going to be spent looking after someone who I love more than anything in the world, but that wants to hurt me, or that I have to watch having seizures and hope that he breathes again. And that is the most traumatic thing for any parent to go through. And God. I got so low in 2016 that I just thought I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to be a parent anymore. I didn't want to be a mom. I just wanted it. The only time I got a break from it was when I slept. And that wasn't much, because I was too frightened to sleep, because I didn't want to miss him having a seizure. But I don't know what. In
your low state, because this is something, again, that we deal with so much, did you have very dark thoughts at that point?
Yeah. I thought about killing myself, definitely.
Right.
Yeah. And that
did you pull your? Ollie, forgive me, but this is actually, I'm gonna nick Ollie's. I would love if you have time to come and be my guest, because you're touching on so many.
Oh yeah, no, 1,000,000%.
If you would like to do that, if you'd like to come on to my own show, because you're talking about things which touch so many people.
I know, but I think it's really important.
I don't want to take up Ollie's time, because he's here for a very specific angle on all of this, and I don't want to shoehorn myself in. Forgive me.
No, I think it's really, really important to talk about mental health. I think it's really important to talk about what it's like to become a mother for the first time, because it's the most frightening thing that I ever experienced in my life. I think we have this rose-tinted glasses view of becoming parents. You meet someone, you fall in love, you have kids, it's all wonderful. It's not. It's even if you have children that are well, it's the bloody most hard
if they're
in the
fabulously
world.
Well.
And and you sort of have to say goodbye to your partner and meet them again in 20 years. It's literally, it's
people don't get it, do they? People don't. They just think, I'm a baby, but my life's going to go on exactly the same. No,
I haven't got kids. So I actually assumed it was have kids. They'll take care of themselves in a few years' time. It's fine,
They want to be driving you Jeep, Ollie,
all night. And you can forget Nookie night, Oliver. That goes out the window.
It is. I so remember, Hannah. You're touching on so many things. I so remember when the twins were born. And we eventually got them out of hospital, because they only weighed 3 pounds. They were less than a Sainsbury's chicken, right? And we stood in the car park with these 2 tiny little things that had been in incubators for God knows, weeks and weeks and weeks. We looked at each other and thought, now what?
I know.
What the hell to do? Anyway, they're fine.
And you're absolutely right. And I think, again, that for me is and then when you have that experience, and then I spent the first 6 months of Alfie's life feeling a bit resentful, because he didn't, babies don't sleep, you're breastfeeding all the time. It's very hard. And I was sort of waiting to be able to do what I wanted to do. and that time never came, because actually you can't, when you become a mother and a father, the first year is about just saying, okay, my life goes on hold. This is about bringing up a newborn baby. And again, that's very tough when you've, I was 32 when I had my first child. I'd spent 32 years of my life doing exactly what I wanted.
Sure.
And then suddenly I couldn't. And that, yeah, exactly. Lots of fun.
There you go, party time.
That was very hard. So, but then when Alfie became ill, the guilt I felt, God, the guilt. I just was like, why didn't I enjoy him? Again, all of those things I went through, I should have enjoyed him. I didn't. So I did. I went through.
Getting you on the show, because this is another theme. You can't undo the past.
Exactly.
It's been and gone. There's nothing you can't get in a time machine and sort it. It's done.
So I think I did. I have actually been on this massive personal journey of discovery about myself because of Alfie, and we got to a point, as I say, with his diagnosis, and we were told there was nothing that could be done for him. And I just got very, very low, didn't want to carry on. And then I saw Graham, who my mother very kindly paid for me to see him. And it did give me fight, because I got the ability to cry. He told, he said, you've got PTSD, but so actually you've got current trauma, because he said that the actual trauma hasn't stopped, it's continuing. And he's like, he made me feel like, because I was like, why am I so upset? Why am I so depressed? I should be strong. And he was like, why? You shouldn't be strong. Why? You're going through the most horrendous thing. It's completely normal.
You're allowed to have feelings. You're human. Exactly. You have to feel what you're feeling. So many people suppress these emotions and tell themselves that they have to be strong. They have to be smart. They have to think. They have to do this. But at the end of the day, sometimes what you have to do is bury your head in the pillow and scream. And you have to let those emotions out, because that's what makes us healthy. And we live in a culture where it used to, like, we live in this modern day world now where no one's allowed to show emotion. It used to be boys can't cry. Now it's no one's allowed to cry, but that's not the truth. Everyone's allowed to cry. We're all allowed to scream. We're all allowed to feel the emotions that are running through us. Now, PTSD is a terrible, terrible illness. And you don't know, like, the side effects which come off of it. People don't understand how severe it is. You're going through this physical, emotional, mental battle. Your son's going through this physical, emotional, mental battle. I mean, it must have been the hardest thing in the world. It really must have been.
It was.
It is. Do you know what, Hannah? One of the things that the lockdown has demonstrated, it's just shown a spotlight on exactly what you've just said. Because when it started, everyone says, oh, right, I'm going to be stuck at home. I'm going to learn Chinese. I'm going to learn Italian. Or I'm going to learn to be a florist. I'm going to start knitting. And other people, like me, was saying, if I can just get through each damn day, that's my victory. Hooray for me. That's enough. I just want to get through the day and not start climbing up the walls. So I totally understand what you're saying. I think, you're hitting on so many aspects that are absolute core, as Ollie knows, to what we do on the shows.
Anyhow, so I think... All right. I think basically what Graham taught me is that, like you say, that I need to own my emotions, feel them, and not be frightened of them, not be scared of them, and actually get them out. And I would, as I say, I've got a very good relationship with my parents, but I feel I was brought up in a household where I didn't see that emotion. I didn't see the crying. I didn't see the screaming. I didn't see the arguing. And probably because they wanted to protect us from that.
And it's a generational thing.
It's a generational thing, exactly. So when I saw this counselor, he was like, it's really good for children to see you cry, get angry, fall out with your partner and make friends, because that teaches them how to have adult relationships. Obviously, you don't want to see your mother crying her eyes out every day. That's not good for you. But if you see a range of emotions, it's really healthy for children to see that you're okay and it's normal. And I don't feel that I necessarily saw that. So that's why I found it really difficult to process how I was feeling, because I felt like I need to keep it all in and then I'm okay. And so he helped me to get it all out, and he actually gave me a lot of strength. And that's when I was like, right, sod this. I'm not going to kill myself. I'm going to fight.
Thank goodness.
That's what happened. Well, I went so low to the bottom as where I could go, that I just thought, I'm going to fight. I know what's right for my child. I'm not going to wait for the doctors to save his life. I'm going to do it. And my partner, bless him, is the most laid back, chilled guy, thank God, because I'm just like this rocket of like fire. And he was like, you do what you need to do and I'll be right behind you, love. So I was like, okay, go on then. And I started to do research and I found cannabis and I spoke to loads of family. I actually have one particular friend called Emily who has a daughter with PCDH19 and they live in California. And she's on an anti-epileptic and they actually grow their own cannabis. And she's been seizure-free for 2 years.
Wow.
And I love her to bits, and I spoke to her a lot, and she told me all about what she was using, and I was so inspired by it, and I was just like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this happen. And obviously it was illegal at the time in England, but we moved to Holland and used cannabis with Alfie, and it's been life-changing.
So
and then
can I ask a question, Russ? Russ, stop for 1 second. So basically, Hannah, let me ask you a quick question. So you spoke to someone in California, okay, who has gone through this journey because their child has the same disorder as your child. Were they? I assume that they weren't using any old cannabis strain. They had a specific strain which was CBD dominant.
Yes, so they were using a dispensary, and then they went. I think they started to grow them, but initially they were using a dispensary. So she sent me a load of pictures of all the things she was using, and she was basically using like a paste, a high CBD paste with a whole plant with THC. But basically, I didn't know anything. I was like, this is all new to me. So I then also went onto YouTube. I remember watching a video of Professor David Nutt on YouTube about the endocannabinoid system, and I was like, I need to understand what I'm talking about because no one else does that I know, and I need to educate myself. So I joined all the CBD groups on Facebook, and I was just a lurker. I never posted, I just read everything and learned as much as I could, basically. And then went to Holland because we did try to get on an Epidiolex trial, because at the time I didn't know that Epidiolex was different to whole plant cannabis. I just because it was cannabis, everyone. And I remember the doctor saying to me at Birmingham Children's, he was like, CBD is not this great thing. He's like, Epidiolex is not brilliant. We see bad side effects. It's not working very well. And I was like, well, okay. So they have this attitude that CBD is crap because they didn't see very good results of Epidiolex. I know it works really well for some people, but for some people that my doctor was seeing, it wasn't working so well. But he said, yeah, I'll try and get you on the trial.
It's important to say this quickly. So Epidiolex is a cannabis product created by a company called GW Pharmaceuticals. It's a very simple CBD product. Actually, it's just sunflower oil and CBD oil and a CBD extract, an isolated CBD extract. There's no broad spectrum of cannabinoids. It's basically the Tincture Club product. Now, the Tincture Club product is a really good product if you're using it for anxiety or post-sport recovery, anti-inflammatory or something like that. But it's not medicine. It's not an anti-epileptic medicine. And it's very important. This is what we talk about, different types of cannabinoids which constitute a cannabis oil. This whole idea of drop tectonics, what's actually in a drop of the cannabis oil you're taking, because every single one is different. And it's very important when, Hannah turns around and she talks about Epidiolex, you understand what the difference is between Epidiolex and the broad spectrum cannabis oils, which these epileptic children are actually getting positive results from. And it's important for the audience and the listeners to understand that not all CBD products are made equal. Certain CBD products have more to them. There are other cannabinoids in there which are not spoken about. There's different strengths and different qualities and different forms of extraction. And all of this needs to be taken into account when you're trying to understand what the difference is between what's saving Hannah Deacon's son's life and what the rest of us are using when we go to the gym. It's not the same product, and it's important we know that.
Yeah,
sorry.
Definitely. No, thanks for clarifying, because you have to remember your audience, and actually a lot of people don't know what Epidiolex is. But it does help children, but for many it doesn't, because of their complex condition. They need the entourage effect of a whole plant product. So we did try to get on the trial. We couldn't get there. So I then said to this doctor, well, I'm going to take him to Holland. And he said, well, if you talk to me about cannabis, I'm going to report you to social services, which I was like, that's going to be the end of our relationship. So we then moved to a different paediatric neurologist at a different hospital, who was actually very supportive, couldn't get Alfie to stop having seizures. He actually had us in for a month in July 2017 and tried lots of other things like immunoglobulins. And because they were trying to work out whether his immune system actually had more of a role to play, but nothing was working other than steroids. I said, I want to go to Holland. I want to work with a paediatric neurologist to try whole plant cannabis. And he was like, go, if it works, I'll prescribe for you. But he didn't understand. I he didn't understand how difficult that was going to be, sadly. But yeah, and we went to Holland and it worked incredibly well. After 6 weeks, took 6 weeks for it to work. He was on 150 milligrams and he started to go where he went 17 days at first without seizures. And then as we went on, he just got better and better. And we came back in February 18 because we basically ran out of money. And I also felt that we had enough evidence. Our doctor had written a really good report. Our Dutch doctor had written a brilliant report in English saying how bad he was when we got there and how good he was now. And we came home and started our media campaign with End Our Pain. That's the lobby group that now works with the other children. And we were very successful. We met Theresa May. She allowed us to apply for a license at that time. Then our neurologist was stopped from helping us in the NHS because he was told that Alfie should go on Epidiolex, which I refused because Alfie was doing well on Bedrolite and I wasn't going to go back to Epidiolex, although actually we had to take him off it when we came home, sadly, so he got very poorly. And then we fought with, the Home Office worked with us, created a license application process for a personal license for our doctor, Professor Mike Barnes, and my GP because Dr. Mike Barnes instructed our GP to prescribe. We got the funding through the CCG based on Alfie's exceptionality because his condition is so rare. So they funded it. And the license was issued on the 19th of June, 2018. And I went to Holland with the importer on the 7th of July and brought the medicine in with obviously the whole plant medicine legally for the first time in London City Airport on the 7th of July. Amazing. And that was an amazing experience. So it was a whirlwind. And I, like you were talking, Russ, I went through this sort of massive process of personal discovery, I think, and got to a point where I trusted my instincts because I didn't trust my instincts at the beginning, and then in the end I did. And I still, life's not perfect. I still get problems now with anxiety, with worry about Alfie and all those things, but that's why I do this. One, because I know what it's like to be that family that is really struggling, and I feel very, very angry that there are families left struggling like I was when they really don't need to be. And that's really disgraceful. And I will continue to use my voice to stand up for those people. But also, secondly, because it gives me a really positive thing to do when I still have a huge amount of grief about my child. I'm still very worried about his future. I still get days where I feel very sad that he is not the little boy that I thought I might have. I'm so proud of him and I love him more than anything in the world. But I also wonder, like my daughter's really well and she's wonderful and she's got me through some very dark moments and I've had to fight for her, fight to be the good mother I want to be for her as well. But I also feel very, very sad about Alfie.
How is your daughter with Alfie?
She's brilliant. She's very patient because he winds her up all the time. But she's very good. And I actually spoke to Professor Barnes about this because not many people know, so I'm sure he won't mind me telling you this, but his sister was severely epileptic. And so he really understands what it's like to be the sibling of a severely epileptic person. And I've said to him before, I really worry about Annie growing up with a brother who's different to her friends. There's no one else like Alfie with their friendship group. And he said, she'll grow up to be kind and robust and thoughtful. And he said, actually, it's, and I think that's why Mike is so involved still when he should probably be putting his feet up. He really cares about this because he has had a family. His mother actually campaigned in London for respite for his sister in like the 60s when respite wasn't a thing. And she apparently camped out in the council offices until they looked after her.
I asked for a particular reason. I asked for a particular reason because I was involved with a charity for a while. Little boy went to sleep, absolutely fit as a fiddle, and just died in his sleep. Just gone. And so I got to know the family, and the little boy's sister, who was sort of a teenager now, said, no one has ever. I said, how are you doing? She said, no one has ever asked me.
Well, that's
it's like because you're so full of grief, understandably, about
I've tried to be very thoughtful about that. I'm sure when now Annie's a teenager, she'll, have something to say about it. I'm sure I won't get it right. But I have always, from the beginning, been very honest with her. Even when she was a baby, I talked to her about Alfie. I've always told her about how I felt. She's seen me cry about it. I've told her how I feel about it. Even now at 6 years old, I've said sometimes, Mummy finds it hard to parent Alfie because he is, some days, most of the days he's brilliant and very happy, but some days his behaviour can be very difficult and challenging because of his condition. And I've talked to her very openly about that. But I've also always said to her, if you need to talk to me about how you're feeling, if you're sad, if, all of those things, because I really want her to express how she's feeling about having a brother like Alfie. But I think she's very, very, at the moment, she's very happy and centered and she seems okay.
Incredible.
But we just talk, because that's, I think, the most important thing is to communicate about it.
I think it's important to have that honesty with, with the other child, like it's really important because like Mike said to you, like Dr. Barnes said to you, she'll grow up to be compassionate and she'll grow up to be caring because that's what happens when kids are forced to live in a situation. And most kids are cruel. They're raised to not know that they're actually being cruel. I mean, your kid probably knows exactly what cruelty is, and she lives in a way that her brain will be different to everyone else. She'll be a better person. In a weird way, she's going to be a better person for it. It'll just make it like the world is so full of harsh, mean people. She's not going to be one of them, which is quite lovely.
A couple of very nice comments coming in for you, Hannah. Dave Sleet, who is in the very leading part of the psychotherapeutic community, says emotional balance is the key. Very true. And Veronica Curran says this, Hannah, I have so much respect for you and all these parents. And, I think we can only echo that.
So I want to ask a question. So I want to talk about the issues still with the current medical system because we've got 10 minutes left. I think this is important. 95% of what I wanted to speak about, we're not going to do. It's not you, it's Russ with his mental health. He loves bringing mental health into cannabis conversations.
It's almost like this was a mental health station.
Exactly. It's almost like I partnered up with a mental health radio station. Who'd have thunk it?
What a stupid thing to do.
So we were talking and you were talking about how, so this is 3 years ago. We're coming up to the anniversary of Alfie receiving his medication 3 years ago. And one of the biggest problems is over the last 3 years, no other kids have received an NHS prescription. And I mean, they're very limited.
Yeah, very limited. Yeah.
Very limited. And the ability to get an NHS prescription is limited. And even the ability for epileptic patients, child patients to see a doctor is also getting harder, right? You were telling me about how there were 3 or 4 doctors. Now there's only 1 left. There's it's strange in a market which should be, heading for the sky, it's actually heading for the ground. In a market which is legal, where opportunities and, opportunities and advances in this space should be happening, we're actually taking steps back and opportunities are not there. People are not playing in this industry the way they should. So I just wanted you to talk about that for a little bit, because I know that's quite important to your heart.
Yeah, extremely important. And as you mentioned, I was in London yesterday with a family presenting. I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister asking him to intervene in the issue and to talk to me about how we can try and work out the issues within the sector and ensure that NHS prescriptions are delivered to these families. And also I went with the Brauns, and Thomas Braun, aged 9, handed in a letter on behalf of his little brother Eddie, because he's very severely epileptic and his parents are spending their time raising money to pay for medicine privately, which is disgraceful, really. When you have a disabled child, you have enough on your plate without having
also, we're not talking about hundreds here, we're talking about thousands and thousands of pounds a month. I mean, I was doing some mathematics with Hannah on the phone. I take a very large dose of CBD on a daily basis. I take about 130 milligrams. You said that Alfie's taking 3 times what I'm taking, right? So then when you think about it, and then the thing is what I pay and what I buy, I'm buying isolates, I'm buying, I'm not saying it's cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than these full spectrum extracts, which are coming from companies like Bedrolite. You're talking about 1,000, if not 2,000 to 3,000 pounds worth of medication a month, right?
The price has come down a lot. I mean, at the beginning, when Alfie got his license and they did the first import of Bedrolite, it was £397 a bottle, which is just ridiculous for 10 mils of whole plant cannabis. But so the price is coming down, but it's still for 10 bottles, you're looking at £1,600 a month, which is a lot of money.
Huge.
For anyone.
It's huge.
anyone to spend, and so they're having to fundraise. It's the only way they can do it. One family's actually sold their home and live with family, so they can afford to pay for their daughter who's in residential care to have this medicine because it stops her having seizures and it gives her quality of life. It's just barbaric, to be honest. It's absolutely barbaric, and I feel, parents wouldn't be doing this if it didn't work. These children are the evidence. They have proven for the last 2 years using private prescriptions that their children are well. Even drug science actually have recently collected all the data from these families for the last 2 years and actually published it, peer reviewed it and published it by their researchers, and showed an 84% improvement. And this is real world evidence data, an 84% improvement in the seizures. So there is evidence. So for NICE to say that, well, there's no evidence of safety is not true. The problem is basically the law was changed. The government, I feel, felt we've changed the law. Now it's over to the doctors. They don't understand the bureaucracy that's behind it. And that's what annoys me, that they won't speak to me. They won't speak to the campaign groups who understand all the issues and the nuances in the bureaucracy. They just think they've done their job. And Matt Hancock stood up many times in Parliament and said, we've changed the law, now it's up to doctors to prescribe. That's nonsense, because the problem is that NICE have to recommend nationwide use of a medicine for it to be funded by the NHS. NICE say there's not enough randomised control evidence, or any randomised control evidence, of things like Bedrolite, because it's a whole plant product. There won't be randomised control trials because that's what's done in single compounds, hence why Epidiolex and Sativex are licensed, because they're single compound products. So that's the issue. What NICE need to do is have some innovation and create a pathway for botanical medicine. So say, this isn't a pharmaceutical, it's not a single compound. We need to create a framework of safety for botanical medicine and look at real world evidence and look at observational data. When they do that, they will see that this medicine is very safe. They will then hopefully approve its use. NHS England will then commission it, which means that they will allow funding for it. Then the doctors can prescribe. And that is the problem. That's why we're at this stasis where nothing's happening, no prescriptions are coming forward. And that's the problem. But the government continue to roll out these statements saying, we changed the law and where clinically appropriate, they can be prescribed. It's not true. It's not the reality of these families. And that's why I've continued to campaign on this point for the last 3 years, because it is unfair. And if it's good enough for Alfie, it's good enough for them. And that's it.
There's one thing I want to say, and this is, I've noticed this around cannabis, around medical professionals. They still have this singular view of cannabis. They see cannabis as one thing. They see it as a plant which gets you high, as opposed to opening it up and seeing it as the plethora of different compounds which it actually is.
Pharma. It's a million medicines in one plant.
Exactly, it's pharma. So like cannabis as an umbrella is the same as pharmaceuticals. But the problem is doctors don't see it that way. Yeah. So, and I don't think the government sees it that way either. They're like, yes, we've legalized cannabis. Fine, you can go and buy a bag of weed. That bag of weed will kill Alfie. If you were to go on a private prescription and go to, let's say, the Sapphire Clinic or go to Lifey Group and get a standard THC, CBD drops or a bag of cannabis flowers, that's not what your son needs. And I don't understand why the medical professionals who do see drugs as individual and independent, why they can't see how all of these different compounds all have their own little, their own little think basically
power. The problem is they're not taught about botanical medicines at university when they learn to be doctors. They're not taught about the endocannabinoid system, one of the most important receptor systems in our bodies, which I just still can't believe they're not taught it. And I think they've grown up in the world of prohibition, haven't they, as children, probably right through the 70s, and where we were told that cannabis was dangerous, that the BPNA, for example, the British Paediatric Neurology Association, have put out guidance saying that THC is damaging for the growing brain. Well, that actually isn't evidence. The only evidence that they had for that is an American study where adolescent boys smoked high THC and they saw some cognitive decline. This isn't that. And they're using that data to say we shouldn't have it available. What they'd like to see is every compound in the plant randomized controlled. So if that happens, we'll be waiting about 2,500 years until this medicine's actually available.
With a fair wind, Hannah.
It's just nonsense. Exactly. So we have to continue to campaign on that point that the framework needs changing. This is an exceptional medicine. It doesn't need, and also actually within the NHS, there's loads of medicines that are given to kids that are unlicensed, that are dangerous as far as I'm concerned, that have terrible side effects, and they give them because they're pharmaceuticals. And that's this mindset of going, it's okay to prescribe a pharmaceutical, even if it's awful and dangerous, but we can't prescribe a botanical medicine with hardly any side effects.
You're absolutely right.
But it's about education.
It is all about education. It's all about time. Which we are sadly out of. Hannah, you have been the most fantastic guest.
You're incredible.
Please come back and talk to Ollie. Ollie, thank you as always for finding the most extraordinary people on the planet. This is Men's Radio.
Thank you so much
Until the same time next week.
Thank you.
Stay safe.